Good afternoon, everyone. We are getting ready to start our next part of the agenda, and we are going to have our report outs from our different work group facilitators. So I would like to ask if Dr. Sherin would be kind enough to come up for a few moments. And these are just brief reports on what was covered in our work groups, just 45 for the past 45 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Sherin.
So I want to just summarize briefly that we began our session on prevention and awareness with this poster session. There's an organization out of New York City called Mentoring in Medicine, and they connected our session with students all over the United States with the posters that were submitted by students online over the last week. And then our participants in the audience here picked out the winners that will be used for promotional for awareness with other students in our community. And the winners were, drum roll please, number 3 is number 13. So you can come up here and look at the posters afterwards. And then in second place, the second runner-up was number 18. And then the winner was number 14. So, thank you. You have there the posters, and that was pretty exciting. So what audiences do you want to reach for awareness and prevention? There are many different audiences, and there's many different communication channels. And then we had a robust discussion for the next half hour or so, because the poster contest took a bit of time. And we talked about creating a standard flyer for pediatrician offices. And as myself, I'm a family physician, I'll say, don't leave us out, include the family docs too. And we also talked about an event that's coming up on October the 3rd. How many people here have heard of National Night Out? You need to know. National Night Out, as the name implies, is a national night out with all the police departments in the United States. So how many people here from Seminole County? Great. How many people from Orange County? Great. How many people from Lake County? Okay. How many people from Pinellas County? Yeah, there are people from Pinellas County. How many people from Osceola County? Any? No. Any other counties? Hillsborough. Okay. I don't care what county you live in Florida, and I know we have others from counties in the Atlanta area because Dr. Cope is here. And then we have the Richmond area of Virginia. I think it's Henry County or Henrico County, in Richmond, Virginia, where Virginia Commonwealth University is. Every county in the United States, sheriff's department, local police, they have National Night Out. So now you know. Now in Florida, we do it in October because of the heat. The rest of the United States does National Night Out in August. I want you to all know about National Night Out because it's where your police department reaches out to the community. It's also a time when health can reach out too. So, pediatrician offices, physician offices, healthcare organizations, a standard flyer with educational information about PAM, primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. Now, Dr. Cope has a flyer that's a standard flyer from the CDC. It may be updated, but that's ready. That's shovel ready, so to speak. It's ready to use. So on the CDC's website, under PAM, primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, we can use that flyer. Number 2, a great idea was suggested, a scouting merit badge. Whoa, this could take off. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, Brownies? Do they do that? Could there be, merit badges that are created just around this topic area? And, kind of a little face that also takes on the characteristic of the amoeba. And that, Scouts can work toward for a merit badge. So that's a fantastic idea, because that's something that could get national traction, right? Then you get into the various forms of social media and the age groups that can be dependent, whether it's Instagram and Snapchat, that you might get a younger audience, Snapchat being particularly popular with teens, or Facebook with, maybe adults, and then finally getting into the hashtags and having some branding of hashtags. Jack actually said that he would investigate the hashtags, and whether it's Jordan's Smile, or Amoeba Summit 2017, Amoeba Summit 2018, whatever hashtag would be developed out of this. Amoeba Slayers that would be developed, we're looking at that. And different emojis that could be designed. Children themselves could design, that could then be used. You know how popular those are on smartphones, emojis. But you see where this conversation is going. What's going to create a buzz? What's going to have uptake? What's going to have traction? What's going to create awareness? And that's the point. Where can the prevention come? And the last comment that was made in the group was specifically who in the workforce can help to drive the prevention messages? Well, the prevention practitioners within the hospitals, the infection control practitioners, the infection practitioners, the ICP or IP work groups throughout the hospitals. So just as Sheila Black works with the laboratorians, the infection control staff, nurses in the Florida hospital system, All Children's, St. Pete, Broward, whatever hospital systems, Grady in Atlanta, Virginia Commonwealth, whatever institutions you're all affiliated with, same standard set of professionals in all the healthcare institutions across the United States. So the ICPs, the infection control practitioners, the prevention practitioners, and that can drive the conversation of prevention. And they can also use social media in their fields of endeavor. So those are the kind of things we talked about in the prevention and awareness space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sherin. And next, I would like to invite Dr. Dumois to come up, if you would please, Dr. Dumois, and tell us a little bit about what the early detection work group discussed.
Thanks, Chad. Okay, so we discussed two main topics. The first topic we discussed was whether we need to make any modifications to the current algorithm and protocol that was discussed this morning. There were a few suggestions. One was to add informing the local health department in addition to contacting the CDC, and I think that's a good idea and an easy thing to add. Another was to maybe add the information relevant to the transport team that Florida Hospital integrated into their plan that we heard in Dr. Kirby's presentation this morning. Another suggestion was regarding the issue of a lumbar puncture being done at a referring institution being transferred to the tertiary care center, where we want them to send the spinal fluid, to maybe somehow ask the physician who at the referral institution or the tertiary care institution who's going to receive the patient to ask them to have the spinal fluid sent with the patient, so that it doesn't accidentally get left. Because if it doesn't come with the patient, then it's a lot harder to get it to where you want it. And then the last point about modifying the protocol was to maybe have a suggestion that hospitals develop their own hospital-specific procedures for how to send the spinal fluid to the CDC for the PCR on weekdays, weeknights, weekends, and holidays, because they may encounter challenges during some of those off times. And that may be, again, specific to every hospital. The next major topic that we discussed was how to disseminate the protocol for implementation in all hospitals, initially trying to target all the hospitals in Florida. So we tried to think of different organizations that might help us do that. We heard Dr. Sherin mention his presentation to the Florida Medical Association this morning, and we thought that maybe we could tap them as well as the Florida Hospital Association. They often work together, I know, with legislative efforts that maybe they could help with disseminating this protocol for us. They may have newsletters or listservs or some other modality that we could use. There's the Florida chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Florida College of Emergency Physicians, and we could ask them about what sort of ways we might be able to disseminate the protocol to all their members. We are going to investigate whether there are any Florida pharmacy associations to not only help disseminate information about the protocol, but also stocking miltefosine in their pharmacies. With disseminating information to laboratories, I just included that I think that the efforts here at Florida Hospital that Sheila Black told us about this morning in developing an instructional video that would be disseminated to any hospital lab that wanted it is a great start. And that now I don't know if there's any sort of laboratory group for Florida or even a listserv of the Florida hospitals specific to laboratory staff, but I'll ask Sheila afterwards. Unless you want to comment now, Sheila.
There are local chapters of national ones that we can reach out to.
Great, thank you. And then one other suggestion that was made is that whatever modality is used to send the protocol to different hospitals that might be interested in implementing it, and we would ask them to strongly consider implementing it, that we would provide some sort of email listserv to which they can email questions about implementation. And I thought that was a good idea because sometimes it's easier just to do what somebody else did and not reinvent the wheel. We're going to be providing a lot of information, but questions may come up, challenges that they encounter as they try to get it started, and this would be an easy way to answer their questions. And we could just have a group of people in this audience who would be willing to answer those questions as they come up. And that was it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dumois. One thing that we did from last year's summit was split our original work group of early detection and treatment into two different ones. An excellent example of how the summit is evolving each year. So our next work group representative will speak a little bit about what the treatment group, and I don't know if we have, there we go, Dr. Linam. Thank you, Dr. Linam.
So I think we're going to make this a team effort. So there's a couple things that we really sort of drilled into. The first one I'll talk about, and then I'll let Alejandro talk about the other. But the first thing that we spent some time talking about was the drug consignment program that the drug company that distributes miltefosine has made available. And there's some hospitals here in Florida that keep a stock of miltefosine on hand, and that allows them to readily get miltefosine to patients. But there's a lot of hospitals that haven't taken advantage of it. I know when I was in Little Rock, we explored that. I talked with our pharmacists. They thought it was a good idea, but I think ultimately, as of the time that I left, I don't think anybody ever pulled the trigger on it to make it happen. So I think some things that we could do is to work to make that process as smooth and easy for a hospital to take on as possible. And then I thought also being strategic. We certainly don't need miltefosine in every hospital across the South, but I think we should think strategically about what are the key hospitals across these high-risk areas, especially in the South, where we should have a stock available within an hour or two drive across the South, where we can get it to where we need it quickly, where it doesn't require a flight. It requires maybe a short drive, but we can get it to the patient quickly and help that along. So that was one of the things that we talked about, and I think an area that is something that I think we could take some action on, at least on our side of things.
This one is kind of a mix between early treatment and early detection, but one of the pediatricians was in the workshop, and we are increasing awareness in the hospital, in the emergency room, asking the question about water exposure, and if it's positive, send the communication to the lab. But there is a question that is not done at the pediatrician office when the kid comes with a history of headache, fever, and they say, oh, maybe it's just viral flu illness, go home, come in 48 hours and see how he's doing. So we talk about, how to increase the awareness in the offices as well of the pediatrician, of the rapid cares, and actually ask the question about exposure. Because a lot of time the parents prefer to take the kid to the pediatrician instead of coming to an emergency room. And that would be could be 48 hours that you are missing time. So it's more like an early detection, but kind of goes at the same time with treatment, when to start the treatment. The other thing that we discussed and came from the pharmacy is what medication do we give first? Because, for example, for the rifampin, what they compound the medication may take hours, so they have it ready to be able to administer. We basically decided that whatever medication you have ready to give, just go ahead and give it. There was some discussion whether or not miltefosine was the one that needed to be given first, and we kind of agreed that that's not the case. So whatever medication you have available to give it, and we still don't know exactly which of all the medications is the one that is making the change, or is the combination of them that are making the change. There is a good question that we're not going to have an answer, and is like, at what point do you start the whole treatment, including medications with everything else, hypothermia, intubation, EBD, like we do it right away as soon as we have the diagnosis? We wait until we show signs of, increased intracranial pressure. We don't know what is the best moment to start it, and I think, Humberto probably can touch much on that because he's the one that deals with the ICU part. I think that in our experience, with the one single experience, if we have another confirmed case, we probably will do everything, but, doing all those things, they do have a lot of, risk associated with the hypothermia, the surgery, and the EBD, and we don't know what the right answer is.
Thank you. Just to answer that, I think the best way is to actually just wait to get confirmation. I think once you have any of these concerns in whatever ER or any other outpatient pediatric offices or adult offices, is to get at least, you could get whatever, like Dr. Alejandro said, Jordan, is to give whatever medicine you have. Our ERs tend to have the amphotericin, so we tend to give that one right away because it's IV and it's readily available. The methotrexate, we have it stashed in our hospitals at Florida Hospital, but not every hospital has that. But the key is to get the amphotericin IV or whatever you have there available and just give it. With regards to all the other steps that are very, very critical, they're very invasive. So in order for me to do that, I would have to get confirmation. And true confirmation would be from the PCR from the CDC. Once they confirm it, I don't even care how the amount of load, if it's high or low, it's positive, I'd start everything. And the key is to get them, like I said, sedated, intubated, and put them in a coma. And there's no science to it right now because, we would have to have many patients that we could study. But the key is to get the body temperature below, warmer temperature. Our body temperature is really warm, and they thrive on that. So the key is to keep them very, very cold, as cold as tolerable, because obviously it has its own side effects as well. And so the key is to make them, in my mind, make a cyst. So if they have a cyst, let the medicine work, and we go from there. But I guess for everybody else who's outside and has a concern that there be a patient that might be with the amoeba, is whatever medicine of the cocktails, or call the CDC. They gladly will help you, and right away, whatever medicine you could give, just give it. The methotrexate is a little tough, because the methotrexate, which I found out for the first case, was that it's a pill. So if your kid's not conscious, guess what? It's going to be very difficult for that patient to drink the pill. So you have to crush it up and put it through a G tube. So that's another thing that I just found out. But all the other medicines that you have IV are readily available in the ER or any outside hospital, or send them straight to the nearest ER and at least give the one dose. Every medicine counts. And like Dr. Jordan said, we don't have one that's specifically accurate. It's a cocktail of medicine. So if you get one of them, it's better than none of them. So that's pretty much it.
So I think we can partner with Juan with the algorithm, and maybe help on the treatment end of this, provide some further refinements to an already great tool to see if we can't even make it better moving forward, since you're already working on it. All right, thanks.
One last thing, and I agree. I believe, as Dr. Lenara had mentioned, it's with regards to the CSF. I agree. Taking the CSF with the patient from the hospital, it's a process that's going to be hard, but it is doable. I have had several patients that I had to argue for the CSF. They would not let it go with the patient, because I guess it's their patient's CSF that stays in the hospital. So it's something that definitely needs to be addressed, and definitely made everyone aware. If you have concern, please ask for that CSF, because we need to take it and send it to the CDC. But again, a lot of hospitals won't let it go. So, but it is something that we need to talk about. Yeah, sorry, question.
Is there ever a justification to give medicine before you get the hormone?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Unless the only way so for example, if I know that I have a patient that we just have previously gone to the same lake exposure, that we've confirmed, there I might start treatment earlier without even lumbar puncture. And it depends. In Orlando, we have many lakes. So if it's the same lake and I just had a recent exposure, that's a high risk and high concern. We've had several scares that's happened, one with a family of 8. And so we did start treatment, early enough, only 1 or 2 medicines. We didn't go through the whole route. But we had CSF at that point. So it depends. Yeah, if you have positive from a certain lake and you've had exposure recently, I would go ahead and at least start some medicine before you even do a lumbar puncture.
I think that's a really tough situation, because there's so many different things it could be at that point. I think that's a good, because that's not a black and white situation, and I think there's a lot of different things to take into consideration. I think that's a time that I would definitely be reaching out to the infectious disease specialist that is closest to you, that's either at your hospital or one that you have some sort of contact with, because I think that's an perfect time to get an infectious disease doctor involved, is when you're sitting there going, hey, I've got this kid, we haven't been able to get a tap, he's got some freshwater exposure, he's acting like he's got meningitis. Should we just be starting typical antibiotics for meningitis? Should we start more? I don't think there is a black and white answer to that, and I think that's time that I would get a specialist involved to help in those decisions.
That was a good question. Any more questions? All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Drs. Liriano, Jordan, and Linam. I'm sitting here listening to these work groups report out. Unbelievable. Is there any question in anybody's mind that we're after this thing big time? So I would like to ask if Dr. Ibne Ali will come up and report, or Dr. Cabral, either one, on the results for the research work group, or both. Wonderful. Even better.
Okay. So we discussed what research should continue on, and it was discussed that the environmental studies are very important, and that we should be looking at water parameters that could either destroy the amoeba, and also know which ones let them stay viable. So everybody agreed that the environmental studies were important, and please continue. And the one thing I have to do is start looking at cold temperatures going the other way, okay? So we're going to do that. And you're going to have a chance in 1 minute. Yeah, and then there's virulence factors, okay? People thought that was important. And the thing I would really like to do is to compare actual different strains of amoeba where I talk with my hands, as you noticed, okay, I'm Italian. To look at strains, like we'll go out and collect maybe an environmental amoeba and compare that in some of our virulence assays with a clinical isolate. And I know that the American Type Culture Collection has several different strains that from human infections, and that we can go there and I can buy those, and we can compare those to maybe environmental samples. And he's got something really interesting to tell you. Tell him about the plant extract.
Okay, let's see. All right. So we know that early detection is so important. And because of this, we thought it would be important to develop a point-of-care test, a test that can be done on site, like in a hospital setting, without needing a sophisticated instrument or an expert person. So we are proposing, or we thought, a point-of-care test based on similar to a PCR, but it would be much simpler, quicker, and easier. And that can be done in a constant temperature. That will be important. So this is something that we agreed that would be good for research purposes for now. And another thing is, you might have heard from Dr. Cope's talk this morning that we sampled 11 environmental samples from North Carolina case, and they were all positive. But we don't know if all those amoebae were able to do the same type of disease like PAM. So it would be good to develop a genotyping system that can differentiate amoebas based on their virulence. So this is something that we want to develop. And maybe I should remind you that we actually did genotype those samples from North Carolina Whitewater Center using our existing tools, but they were all identical, genotype 1. So this is a limitation of our present genotyping system. It can only categorize all the genotypes, all the strains from USA in mostly 2 categories. And maybe another one, third one, but that is very rare. So we are trying to develop a genotyping system that will categorize the US genotypes into 10 or 15 different genotypes. Then we can try to figure out if some genotypes are more virulent than the others. So this is something we are also trying to develop. And the other thing that Shantanu proposed that we can try to develop. In a recent article by Dr. Anjan Debnath from UC Davis, he showed that some plant extracts are showing activity against Naegleria fowleri. So he thought, Shantanu proposed that it may be possible that if it is showing activity against Naegleria fowleri, maybe in natural system, if we plant those trees, it may be possible that they will provide some sort of protection from Naegleria. So these are the 3 things we thought, and she also propose 2 additional things. So these were our summary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Cabral and Dr. Ali. And lastly, we have our Lab Awareness and Detection Work Group. And I think Sheila and Maria, Sheila Black and Maria Brock. Thank you.
Hi. We had a group of 13 very, very engaged members of our group. But before we do that, I just want to offer you a couple of things when it comes to being collaborative. Because every time something happens, okay, you fail fast and you move forward quickly. We have updated best practice SOPs. We also we have an SOP in our laboratory that when a patient will be accompanied by the CSF, we have that in place, an SOP is out there. Another thing that Sheila had mentioned was the education. We are creating a library for the medical technologists or clinical scientists to go and research. But here's one thing that I'd like everybody to know. So Sheila detects it, who do we run to? The pathologist, correct? Now, I sat with the medical director, our CLIA lab director to say, hi, could we include you in the education? Because our pathologists all have their expertise, correct? Neuro, liver, etc. But that may not be their line of expertise. So yay, our pathologists will learn side by side with the clinical scientists on how really to identify this. The other strong partnership we have is I had approached the Dr. Alexander from microbiology and Dr. Villegas. I said, I think you said it's okay to wait at least an hour and a half before we give our final yes along with the pathologists, right? So we're gonna do the GIMSA and the trichrome. That's just a little bit more of what we're doing. But we're very excited that the pathologists are really on board with us. So some of the suggestions, of course, is the visual reminders. Sheila actually on her own bought this, Think Amoeba. So I think it's wonderful. Increasing the signage. Yes, there are signage up there. People ignore it, but we have to be persistent, correct? Okay. Another thing is we had members from the Seminole State College, and it was wonderful. They came up with awesome ideas, like for instance, when they have their health fairs, perhaps give out waters and label them with the amoeba awareness, etc. So they said they'd gladly do that. And one of them had graduated from a high school that was focused on health science. So she says, why not approach the high school as well? So we can do that. And one of our members said that she had a very good friend who's actually in charge of monitoring the swimming pool in a recreation center. And Dr. Cabral, you had sparked an interest in that. We really need that list of the water parameters. And even go to the extent of going to the pool supply stores and telling them that this is what they need to protect everyone. The other thing is the offering, of course, of lectures to the clinical science programs and medical schools. The other really interesting is we have a very metropolitan, cosmopolitan, how do you call this, team here. We had someone from Colombia who still goes to Colombia, talks to her affiliates there, her colleague, she still attends the national conventions out there. So she said, she was already telling them about this, so perhaps she can give the talks out there in her language. We have friends from Guatemala, from infectious control. I had heard that somebody was very concerned about Puerto Rico, the infection in the waters, etc. So maybe we can go to Puerto Rico and do our thing. Articles, we also have gotten in touch with the American Society of Clinical Pathologists, where we will be writing, Sheila and I will be co-authoring an article on best practice for laboratory. We are also writing the piece for the CEUs, which will hopefully go to more than 100,000 registered ASCP clinical scientists. We have gotten in touch with the LabMed, which is the magazine. Advance is another magazine. Somebody had said maybe we should get in touch with Quest, ARUP, because they do have a lot of webcasts. You know, no harm in asking. The other thing is, I know that Shelley and Steve had mentioned about a run. They would like a run, and everybody was, wow. And then somebody said, why not partner with YMCA? Okay, so we're gonna try and talk to YMCA. Sheila, did I miss anything?
Just a couple of things to add what Maria's told you. The class that was here from Seminole State College, this is kind of exciting. The entire class came, and they're going back and they're doing a presentation back at their school on Monday. So that's pretty cool. The concerning thing about that, though, is they had Googled ways to find continuing education, and they just happened upon the fact that the summit was today. So we need a better way of getting this information out to these schools, these health programs where these new students are coming into our programs, our hospitals, so they can be educated and have a way to connect with them. And Maria and myself are more than willing to go anywhere and do whatever it takes to educate these people with what we know and share our knowledge. And I just, one other thing, the younger people in our group that are tech savvy and into these applications, if everybody here is on Facebook, if you will go and like the Jordan Smelski Foundation on Facebook, that connects to all of your connections. And how much more people can we connect with just by doing that simple act? So that was something that was brought up as well.
Dr. Sherin, as you were giving us your reflections from your team, I was just thinking, you know how people have the option of getting a license plate for fishing and hunting and all? Why don't we approach the Transportation Department of Transportation and maybe have an Amoeba?
That actually is one that's very difficult to do in the state of Florida. I'd love to see that as well. But I would say that from a policy standpoint, that is not an easy one to do. The state of Florida has closed the process for the next year. They won't entertain any new license plates of a specialty nature. There are already very many of these, so you would have to approach state legislators on the topic, but it is actually closed to that process at this time. I don't want to disappoint you, but it's not one that's easily opened up.
Now, if I can just mention two other quick things. Sorry, Jack. We had talked about a public service announcement at the beginning of swimming season on TV. Do we see public service announcements anymore on the stations? I don't really know. Is that a possibility? And also, we thought about, the health department in the state of Florida, for all of us who have licensure. They have all of our contact information. Why can there not be a pushed email out to every licensed healthcare practitioner in whatever capacity they work in the state of Florida sometime during the year to remind this that this is something that we need to look for?
Okay, thank you.